we will examine today is Max Weber's The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. For nearly 120 years, this text has been both highly praised and fiercely criticized.
It's absolutely essential. Published way back 1904, 1905, but still incredibly relevant if you want to understand this sort of psychological engine behind the modern West.
Exactly. So our mission today is to really unpack Weber's argument. It's quite nuanced, often, let's say, oversimplified.
That's right. And our sources are snippets from the book itself. It was actually meant to be just one piece of fragment of this huge comparison he was doing of world religions. And the big question he was tackling was basically, why? Why did certain unique cultural things, and specifically modern rational capitalism, only pop up in the West? What circumstances led to that?
And the thing that first got him thinking, the observation that sparked it all, was pretty specific, wasn't it?
It was. He looked at places in Germany like Baden around 1895, places with both Catholics and Protestants. And he noticed that the people running the show economically, the business leaders, the owners of capital, even the highly skilled workers, they were overwhelmingly Protestant.
So it wasn't just random.
Not at all. It was a pattern. And it wasn't just, the process started with more inheritance or something simple like that. Weber felt the explanation had to be deeper, something internal, a difference in motivation.
Okay, so let's get into that motivation. What exactly is this spirit of capitalism he talks about? It can't just be wanting to be rich, right? People have always wanted that.
Exactly. Weber is super clear on this. It's not simple greed, he says. You find that everywhere. Think of he uses examples like a Neapolitan cab driver or a Chinese mandarin aggressively chasing profit. That's just opportunism.
It's ancient. Okay, so what's different about the modern Western version then?
It's the systematic nature, the rational pursuit of profit. And crucially, it's seen as an ethical duty. It's pursued through continuous, methodical business, not just making a quick buck, but building something that lasts and grows.
Right. Endless growth. And he found the clearest expression of this kind of weird new mindset. Not an economist, but in moral teachers like Benjamin Franklin.
Precisely. Franklin's advice to a young tradesman is almost a blueprint for this ethos. Profit becomes a moral imperative.
Yes, some of those quotes are pretty stark when you think about them as ethical rules. There really are. Like, remember this saying, the good paymaster is lord of another man's purse, or the one about the hammer?
Oh yeah, the sound of your hammer at 5 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock at night, heard by a creditor, makes him easy 6 months longer.
It's intense. It's not just business tips. It's a whole way of life. Punctual, fair, frugal, constantly working.
And here's the really wild part, the core contradiction. Maybe this spirit demands that the person exists for the business, not the other way around. You dedicate your life to it, which if you think about just wanting to be happy, you know what Weber calls the eudaimonistic view. It's completely irrational. Why work constantly, deny yourself pleasure just to pour everything back into the business?
Exactly. It doesn't make sense from a purely self-interested, pleasure-seeking perspective. There has to be some other non-economic drive, a compulsion.
Okay, and this is where Weber pushes back against the simpler economic determinism ideas, like maybe from Marxism, the idea that the economy just creates the culture.
Right? He flips it. He points to places like Massachusetts, New England, founded by preachers for very religious reasons. And he says the spirit of capitalism was already buzzing there before the actual capitalist system was fully developed. But then you look at the southern colonies,
Founded by capitalists explicitly for business.
exactly founded for profit. But they struggled to develop that same kind of methodical, relentless economic drive. So for Weber, this suggested the religious mindset came first. It shaped the economic order, not the other way around.
Okay, so if it wasn't the economy itself, we need to look at the theology. What was providing this powerful, almost irrational drive?
And that brings us squarely to Calvinism. And at its heart, the real engine of anxiety here was the doctrine of predestination.
Right? The decretum horrible. The horrible decree which is just bleak.
It really is. God has already decided from eternity who's saved and who's damned. A tiny number gets salvation. Most don't. And crucially, it's got nothing to do with what you believe now or what good deeds you might do later. It's already fixed.
Wow. The sociological weight of that must have been crushing. Weber talks about the inner isolation of the individual.
Immense isolation. Because if you're a believer, your entire existence revolves around one terrifying question. Am I one of the elect? And there's no easy out. No priest can tell you. No sacrament can guarantee it. The church can't change God's mind. It's just you, in this unknowable decree.
How do people even function? You mentioned Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, that image of Christian literally plugging his ears to his family's cries, because his own salvation is all that matters. It's so solitary, so terrifying.
Well, humans need answers, right? That level of raw terror isn't sustainable. So pastoral care, the preachers, they had to find a practical way forward. And the solution was ingenious in a way. Since good works couldn't earn you salvation, that was fixed. They became something else. They became the indispensable sign, the proof that you were already chosen.
Okay, so you can't change the outcome, but you can look for evidence of it in your own life.
Exactly. The idea was fights. Effective faith, real faith, had to show itself in how you lived. So it became an absolute duty for the believer to strive for certitude, o salutis, certainty of salvation.
How do you get certain?
By acting like you were chosen. Yeah, you had to fight doubt as if it were a temptation for the devil. And the way you fought it was through methodical, systematic, successful Christian conduct. That was the proof.
This feels very different from, say, Luther's idea of the calling. Very different.
Luther's view is more traditionalistic. You accept your place in life, your job as God's ordinance. You do your duty there.
But the Puritan view,
it turbocharged the idea. Work, specifically methodical work in a specialized calling, became the primary means of aesthetic practice. It was the way you demonstrated your election. You weren't just working to survive. You were relentlessly, systematically carrying out God's will, improving your status as one of the elect.
Okay, so that intense pressure to prove yourself through work, let's connect that directly to the economic results. If my daily grind is basically my spiritual report card, then being efficient, being productive, that becomes a religious duty.
Absolutely. And the guides from the time, like Richard Baxter's Christian Directory, they spell it out in, well, quite stark terms.
Yeah. What do they say?
Baxter basically calls wasting time the #1 sin, the deadliest sin in principle.
Wow. Wasting time.
Any hour not spending productive, rational labor is an hour lost to working for God's glory. So things like just hanging out, idle chat, luxury, even sleeping too much, you suggest 6 to 8 hours. Max are morally condemned.
That's incredibly demanding. Even quiet contemplation could be bad.
Yes, if it took away from your daily work, it created this relentless psychological drive. Work hard, work methodically, don't stop.
Okay, that definitely explains the productivity push. But what about the money? Doesn't the Bible have warnings about loving money? How did they square making potentially lots of money with this piety?
This is the crucial twist. The genius of it, maybe. This worldly asceticism was fiercely against the enjoyment of wealth. It clamped down hard on consumption, especially luxuries.
Right. The Puritans weren't exactly known for throwing parties.
Not at all. Think about the controversies over things like the Book of Sports. They opposed amusements not just because they might happen on a Sunday, but because they distracted people from the focused, ordered life required to prove their salvation.
So work like crazy, make money, but don't spend it on fun.
Precisely, labor is holy, but enjoying the fruits of that labor through luxury is sinful. The acquisition of wealth was okay, even good, if it was the result of honest, diligent work in your calling. But actually using that wealth for pleasure? That was frowned upon. So the ideal person was
The sober middle-class self-made man. They looked down on the old aristocratic indulgence, the senior's lifestyle. But they also hated the flashy spending of the newly rich, the parvenu ostentation.
okay, I see it now. The system almost forces you to save and reinvest. You work relentlessly because you need proof of salvation. But you can't spend the profits on yourself because that's sinful indulgence.
So what do you do with the money?
You pour it back into the business.
Exactly. It creates this unintentional but incredibly powerful engine for capital accumulation. That money wasn't getting frittered away on castles or parties. It was constantly available, fueling rational, continuous economic expansion. The religious anxiety literally built the financial foundation.
It's quite a chain of cause and effect. Now, was it only Calvinism, or did other Protestant groups play a role too?
Calvinism is the clearest case, the sharpest expression. But Weber notes similar. There may be slightly different dynamics elsewhere, like with Pietism.
Yeah, Pietism often had a more emotional flavor focused on the feeling of grace, but it still had a rational side that insisted on methodical self-improvement. You know, sanctification as a sign you were truly saved. You had to work at developing your state of grace.
And what about the more radical groups? Baptists, Quakers, Mennonites?
They took things even further in some ways. They often rejected sacraments almost entirely, relying on the inner light or individual conviction.
How did that affect their economic behavior?
Well, they're focused on creating a pure church, separate from the compromise of the state. Often led them away from politics and into worldly callings with intense focus. They developed this reputation for scrupulous honesty and diligence. Think of the Quaker reputation, right? Honesty is the best policy. Wasn't just a saying, it was rooted in their religious conviction. And, well, that kind of reliability is very good for business.
Makes sense. But Weber also makes a point that this powerful religious engine needed the right conditions to actually, catch fire and build capitalism, right? It wasn't happening in a vacuum.
Absolutely critical point. This ethic needed fertile ground. Modern capitalism, he argues, required a whole infrastructure of rationality that was unique to the West at that time.
What kind of infrastructure?
Things like the calculability of the world. You needed science based on math and exact and rational experiment. You needed predictable laws, a calculable legal system based on formal rules like the development of Roman law influences, and you needed a modern state with a rational bureaucracy and written constitutions.
So the Protestant ethic provided the intense individual motivation, but it could only translate into full-blown rational capitalism because the West also had these rational systems already developing rational law, science, administration.
Exactly. It was a convergence, a specific historical moment where this unique psychological drive met a uniquely suitable structural environment.
So his conclusion isn't just religion caused capitalism?
No, definitely not. He's very careful. He explicitly says he's not trying to replace one-sided materialist explanation with an equally one-sided spiritualistic one. It was a complex mix of factors. But he argues forcefully that these religious ethics played a unique and fundamental causal role. They provided the specific why, the motivation for organizing life and labor in this incredibly rational, methodical, and ultimately world-changing way.
Okay, so let's recap the core argument for everyone listening. We start with the Calvinist doctrine of predestination,
which creates this deep, terrifying anxiety about salvation. Am I chosen?
That anxiety then pushes believers to look for proof, for certainty in their worldly actions.
Right. And the main way to prove it is through intense, methodical, relentless work in a specific calling.
But the same ascetic principles forbid enjoying the wealth that comes from that work,
leading to this compulsion to save, reinvest, and continuously expand the enterprise,
which inadvertently fuels the engine of modern rational capitalism. This powerful, yet, from a purely human perspective, deeply irrational system.
And that brings us to the rather tragic endpoint that Weber himself noted. Once this capitalist, the machine was built and running.
The original religious fuel kind of burned away.
Yeah. The deep theological anxiety faded, replaced by sheer economic necessity. You work now because you have to survive in the system. We're left with what he bleakly called mechanized petrification.
That famous line specialized without spirit, sensualists without heart, trapped in the iron cage of rationality we built.
It's a powerful image, and it leaves us and you listening with a really provocative question, doesn't it? The original religious route, that intense fear and hope regarding salvation, is largely gone for many people in the modern West.
Our goal here was to convey to you how Weber constructed his own argument.
Exactly. Weber provides us with a truly powerful framework for thinking about the complex and often unexpected relationships between religion, culture, and economics.
Perhaps this is his most enduring legacy. What he showed us is that even our economic behaviors, which today seem very rational and secular, may have cultural and even religious roots deep down that we may not be aware of. Our work ethic, our relationship with money, our definition of success. All of these may be carried over from the long shadow of that ascetic Protestantism. So, after all this historical and sociological analysis, it's your turn, dear listener. Let's think about it together. How much do these cultural codes, the work ethic, the urge to save, rational planning, which arose centuries ago from certain religious concerns and may have lost their original meaning today, continue to influence our economic decisions and even our personal goals in modern life? We may be more entrenched in Weber's iron cage than we realize.
What do you think is a problem worth pondering? We leave you with these thoughts. We truly appreciate you joining us for this in-depth examination. Until our next book review, take care. How much do cultural codes such as rational planning continue to influence our economic decisions and even our personal goals in modern life? Perhaps we are more trapped in Weber's iron cage than we realize.